The first thing Wren Calloway saw, when she opened the cabin door against 20 inches of fresh snow, was a stranger with a thin, dried streak along his left temple and a leather satchel held flat against his ribs, as though it were the only solid object in the world. The storm had been hammering the pines for 3 hours by then. The trees on the rise behind the cabin were bent so far the boughs touched their own trunks, and the wind made a sound she had stopped trying to name. She had been standing at the wood stove, counting matches into a tin. 11 was a comfortable number, 8 was a careful one, 4 meant she had to walk to old Mac's place in the morning, whether the road allowed it or not, when the knock came. 2 short, 1 long, then nothing. She had opened the door because she lived 4 miles from anyone who would knock, and a person who walked through what was happening outside to reach her door was not a person you left on a porch. He was tall, snow-pasted along one shoulder and his right thigh, with a deep cold in his face that went past flushed and back to grey. There was a band of red half-frozen above his eyebrow, where his head had hit something hard, and a pair of dark green leather gloves were tucked into his coat front, the way a man tucked them when he had taken them off to do something that needed his hands. His eyes were the colour of the pond ice she had broken with a hatchet at noon. "My plane is on your pond," he said. His voice came out level, but there was a small catch under it, the catch of a man who had been speaking through clenched teeth for a quarter mile. "I would not be here if I had another option." Wren felt the cold come past him into the kitchen, and through the cold, the smell of pine smoke from her own stove, and beneath that, something faintly metallic from the cut on his temple. 3 senses arriving inside one breath. She lifted 2 fingers and pressed them, briefly, against the underside of her left wrist, the way she did before she committed to anything she could not take back. "Right," she said. "In, before the door freezes." He stepped inside. She closed the door against the white world and threw the deadbolt and the chain. The wind found something to do at the window over the sink. Adam Cade, who was on every front page of every business section in 3 countries that week, who had taken his industrial heat company public 8 days ago and could not at the moment have proved any of it to a small-town judge, stood on the doormat of a cabin in the Adirondacks belonging to a woman he had never seen, and dripped melting snow onto pine boards that someone had recently sanded by hand. "Sit," Wren said. "Boots first. The bench." He did the boots. He did not argue. She put a kettle on the stove without watching her hands do it, because she could not stop watching the cut above his eye. The kettle made the small whisper of cold copper meeting hot iron, the sound of a winter she had spent 6 weeks listening to and could now identify by ear. The kitchen smelled of pine sap and wool and the faint vinegar of the floor cleaner she had used at noon. She knew the way a clean head wound looked when it had stopped bleeding on its own, and the way one looked when it had stopped because the cold had stopped it, and this one was the second kind. "Name?" she said. "Adam," he said. "Adam Cade." "Wren," she said. "Calloway. Stay there." She fetched the box she kept on top of the corner cabinet, a green metal fishing tackle case her father had stocked for ice-out weekends a long time ago, and she set it on the kitchen table and opened it. Sterile pads, saline in a small squeeze bottle, a pair of stainless steel forceps, curved needle, 3/0 silk, 2 small bottles of lidocaine that she had checked the expiry on in October, tweezers, iodine. "Is that—" Adam started. "For later," she said. "Right now, the bleeding." She brought a stool and set it in front of him, and sat down so her face was at his face. She turned on the lamp above the bench. The bulb was warm yellow, the kind that flatters no one, and under it she could see he had been awake a long time before he had ever climbed into a plane. "Is your plane," she said, and did not know what to ask, "burning? Sinking? Was someone with him?" "Intact," he said, "on the ice. Wingtip in a drift. I'm alone." She nodded. She tipped his chin a quarter inch with 2 fingers and turned his head to the lamp. "Is anyone going to fly out here looking for you tonight?" she said. "Not tonight," he said. "Is anyone going to be told that you came down?" "Not tonight," he said again, and there was something in his voice when he said it the second time. Not relief, not exactly, that made her keep her face still and her hands steady on the cotton pad and the saline. She'd heard that flatness before, in men coming out of a hard day and choosing not to talk about it. She had heard it in her father once. The spring he had let her be the one to call the insurance broker because she had a head for figures and he could not face the call himself. "Sit very still," she said. "I'm going to clean this." And while she was doing it, she said, half to herself and half to him, because she had learned, working alone, to narrate small, dangerous tasks so that her own voice kept her hands honest. "Saline first, then I look. If it needs stitches, I will tell you. If it does not, I will close it with 3 of these butterflies. You will not like the saline. It is colder than the room." "Understood," Adam said. The corner of his mouth moved, perhaps 1/4 of an inch. She did the saline. He did not flinch. The saline smelled clean and cold, and a little of plastic from the squeeze bottle, and where it ran down the side of his face, she blotted it with a cotton pad that smelled of nothing at all. She did the look. Above the eyebrow, a clean, horizontal cut, about 1.5 inches long, deep enough to see the white shine of the bone for a moment when she parted it with the forceps. But the bone was uninsulted, and the edges were clean. A panel edge, she would have bet. The corner of an instrument panel, coming up to meet his head when the plane had hit. She could smell the iodine in the open bottle on the table, sharp and orange bitter, and the warm wool of his coat draped over the bench, and the small undernote of the kerosene she had ready for the lamp. "Stitches," she said. 3. "I have lidocaine. It is in date. Are you allergic to lidocaine?" "No." "To anything?" "Penicillin," he said. "I have none of that on the premises," she said, and the small, unintended pun made the corner of his mouth move again. She drew up 0.5 milliliter and laid it in carefully under the skin and watched the muscle around his eye go quiet under the needle. She turned to her tackle box and chose the suture, threaded the curved needle, and tied her first knot, and the kitchen smelled of pine smoke and iodine and the new sharpness of a snowstorm that had not finished. The kettle began to whistle. She heard it the way she heard everything in this room. 3 logs in the stove, kettle low note, wind at the north window, ticking from the wall clock her grandfather had made out of birch and an old marine chronometer. She had counted 7 separate sounds in the room, and could account for every one of them. Now there was an 8th, a man's breathing. The needle went through cleanly. She set the second knot. He did not move. "Why?" she said. "Were you flying alone in this?" He did not answer right away. "I had to be somewhere on Monday," he said finally. "Anywhere I would have heard of," she said. "Montreal," he said. Then, when she did not say anything to that, "There was a meeting." "There is no meeting in the world worth that pond," she said, and tied the 3rd knot, and bit through the silk with her teeth the way her father had taught her on fishing trips when she was 9, because tackle box surgery did not include surgical scissors. She sat back. She had stopped the bleeding. The kettle screamed. She set the suture line down and went to it. She took the kettle off the burner with a folded towel. "Tea," she said. "Then we put you near the stove until you are warm enough to lift a mug without spilling it. Then we will talk about how a man with your face flies a plane into my pond on a Friday afternoon in March." "Thank you," he said. The 2 words were tired, the kind of tired that has nothing to do with the day. "Don't thank me yet," she said. "It is a small cabin, and the storm is here through Sunday." He looked at her for the first time, without doing the calculation he had been doing since she opened the door, the calculation of any room he walked into. He simply looked at her face under the warm yellow lamp, at the practical brown braid she had finished 1/2 hour ago, at the wool shirt she had cuffed twice to her forearms. at her grandfather's gold watch on her left wrist, on its too long leather band. And his eyes did something they had not done in 8 days. They softened. "Then I am in your debt for 40 hours, he said. "You are in nobody's debt for being out of weather," she said. And she said it the way her father had said it the night he had pulled the stranded ice fisherman off the lake in 2009, which was that she said it without any softness in the words, and all of the softness in the way she set the mug down. The wind hit the door once, hard, like a knuckle. The lamp flickered. Somewhere outside, the line came down between 2 trees with a small, visible blue spark 100 yards north. And at the same moment, the refrigerator hummed, and then did not. "Right," Wren said, calmly. "And there is the power." She lit the kerosene lamp on the table without breaking pace. She had counted the matches, after all. She had 11 in the tin, and she had used 1. She put the box near her right hand. Adam Cade. 8 days a billionaire on paper, and 20 minutes inside a stranger's house. Watched her light the lamp, and did not understand why the action, the cupped hand, the small breath through her nose, the quick wrist motion to extinguish the match, made the back of his throat ache. He set his right hand around his cuff button and held it there, and listened to the storm finish closing its hand around her cabin, and tried to remember what he had been so sure of when he had taken off from Lake Placid that morning. The kitchen smelled of iodine, pine smoke, and the wet wool of his coat draped over the bench by the stove. Wren put a mug in his hand. The mug had a chip on the rim and a faded blue band of paint around the body, and it was the warmest object he had touched in a week. "Drink," she said. "Slowly. Then sleep on the daybed by the stove. Tomorrow we will see what is what." He drank. He drank slowly because she had said to. The wind closed its other hand. In a clapboard farmhouse in Connecticut, a woman named Margot Veen was at that moment standing in front of a stock quote screen with a silver pen between her thumb and forefinger, and a problem on the screen she had been promising her late father, in private, that she would solve before Monday. She clicked the pen twice. The pen was the only thing she had inherited that she actually used. She did not yet know that the founder she was about to remove from a chair was, at the same hour, sitting in a kitchen 400 miles north, holding a chipped blue mug and saying thank you to a stranger. That would come later. For now, in the kitchen with the iodine and the kerosene lamp, Wren turned to the wood stove and added a log. She added 1 log, not 3. She kept count. Outside, the snow erased the tracks Adam had made from the pond to her door, and then it erased the tracks she had been making to the woodpile all afternoon. And by the time she sat down across the table from him, with her own mug, and looked at his face in the lamplight, the cabin was a small lit shape inside a white country, with no road in or out, and the only person who knew either of them was alive, and even she did not know who he was yet, was the woman who had opened the door. She did not ask him what he meant by, "I had to be somewhere on Monday." She would ask him in the morning. She had learned, in 28 years, that a question asked at the wrong time was a debt the asker collected only in resentment. She drank her tea. He drank his. The lamp burned steadily. Sometime after midnight, she set him up on the daybed near the stove with 2 heavy quilts, and went up the loft ladder to her own bed. He listened to her stop on the 3rd rung, as she always did, to test it, and then to the small, honest sound of her settling in above him. He had not slept beneath another person's roof since he was 19. He did not sleep. He listened to the cabin breathe around him in the firelight, and to the wind, and to the small, even sound of the woman above him. And he thought a thought he had not let himself think in many years. He thought, "Nobody knows I am here." For 1 hour, that thought had the shape of fear. For the next, it had the shape of something else. By the time the firelight had gone to coals, he had named the second shape. It was relief. He did not have a word for that. He kept his thumb on his cuff button until he, too, slept. Saturday morning came in 2 greys. the grey of the snow still falling, and the grey of pre-dawn through a kitchen window that had iced over on the inside. The ice on the inside of the glass was the soft kind of ice, the kind that took the warm pad of a thumb to clear and left a wet print behind. The room smelled of cold cedar from the stove being banked low, and the faint, dusty sweetness of an old cabin, warming up after a hard freeze. Somewhere in the rafters a beam creaked once as it stretched. Wren was up before light. She had built up the wood stove and put coffee on the camp percolator on top of it, because the coffee maker required power, and she had pulled on the second wool shirt she kept on the loft hook for storm days, and she had come down the ladder with the same care she had gone up it, and Adam Cade had pretended to be asleep until she was past the bedroom door and into the kitchen, because he did not yet know how to greet her at 5:30 in the morning in her own house. She knew he was not asleep. She let him have the courtesy. "Coffee in 10 minutes, she said to the stove. "There is a bathroom through the bedroom. There is a towel on the hook with the blue stripe. It is yours for the duration." He sat up. He was stiff in the shoulders, and his face hurt in the precise place she had stitched. But the headache he had expected was not where he had expected it. He stood, found his balance, made his way past her with a small bow of the head he did not realize he made, and used the bathroom, and stood at the sink with cold water in his hands for a long time, and looked at himself in a small square mirror beside a print of a heron in flight. The face in the mirror was a face he had not really seen since the IPO. He had been seeing the press photograph of his face, which was a different thing. This face had a clean, fresh cut, closed with 3 small black knots, and snowburn high on the cheekbones, and the careful, steady eyes of a man who had been alone with himself for 9 hours, and had survived it. When he came back into the kitchen, she had put a chipped white plate of oatmeal in front of his place at the table, with a swirl of maple syrup and a strip of bacon she had cooked on a cast-iron pan over the stove. There was also half a slice of toast, which she had clearly buttered with the last of something in a butter dish, and a small wedge of orange. "This is a lot," he said. "This is breakfast," she said. "You did not have to." "Right," she said. "I did not. Sit down." He sat. He picked up the spoon. He had not had oatmeal on a plate since his grandmother had been alive. He had not had bacon cooked over a wood fire ever. He ate slowly. The oats were rolled, not instant. The syrup tasted like a particular tree. She drank her coffee standing at the window. The window faced east. There was no east yet. There was a wall of falling snow where east was supposed to be, but she watched it anyway. He watched her watching it. "Is your plane okay where it is?" she said, not turning. "For now," he said. "I covered the cow. The engine is shut down clean." "Will the ice hold?" "Through tomorrow." "After tomorrow?" "The pond will start opening at the edges first," he said. "I will move her, or I will not." She nodded at the window. "What were you flying?" she said. "A Cessna 180 on skis," he said. "Mine." "You fly it yourself?" "Yes." She did not look back at him when he said the single word, but something in her shoulder eased a quarter inch, and he saw it. "There is mail on the porch table," she said after a moment. "Old Mac brought it Friday before the snow. There may be a paper from the city in it. I have not looked. The week's news is generally the week's news." "Old Mac?" he said. "Donald McCrae," she said. "Retired ranger. He plows my drive when the road allows, and brings me my mail when he comes by. He is a mile west on snowshoes today, I expect. He will come by on the snowmobile after lunch if he can." "That is a lot of trouble for somebody to take." "He likes a person who keeps their cabin clean and does not waste his time," she said. "And he likes you." "He likes my coffee," Adam smiled. The smile cost him very little and surprised him. The cut over his eye tugged. "Old Mac is going to be—" Adam started. "Old Mac is going to be Old Mac about it," Wren said. "He has pulled 3 planes out of 3 different ponds in his life. He will pull yours out of mine. if the spring lets him. He will ask you twice as many questions as I will, and he will believe the answers about half as much." "Noted," Adam said. She turned from the window then. She set her mug down on the counter next to the coffee pot. "While we are eating," she said, "you should know what the situation is." He set his spoon down with care. "The road is closed," she said, "and will be closed until late Sunday at the soonest, which means the plows have not been up the county road and would not turn down my drive even if they had. There is no cell signal here, has not been since the towers moved in 2021. There is a landline. It is on copper. It has gone out twice in 3 years, both in summer. So if you need to make a call to a person who is going to worry about you tonight, the landline is on the porch, and you are welcome to it. I am not going to ask you who. I am going to ask you to keep it short, because the line is shared with 3 other houses, and Mac's wife uses it on Saturday mornings to talk to her sister in Halifax. You can pay me back later by chopping kindling, which will be done from the woodshed door, because the front door is going to stay closed against drift." She paused. "That," she said, "is the situation." "Understood," Adam said. "Eat your bacon." He ate his bacon. He thought, as he ate, that he had been spoken to in that exact tone exactly once before in his life. By his father, in a hospital corridor in Pittsburgh, the night Adam's mother had finally let go of his hand. His father had said, "The situation is this." And then he had said 3 short sentences and a long one. Adam had been 14. He had not been spoken to that way since. Everybody he employed spoke to him in language designed to leave him the freedom to disagree. Every woman he had been with had spoken to him in language designed to please him before it informed him. He had not realized, until this moment, that he had been hungry for the other thing. The bacon on his plate was crisp at the edge and soft at the center, a small, uneven curl of pink and brown that smelled of wood smoke and salt, and the faint maple sweetness where the syrup had run against it. The plate was warm under his palm. The kitchen was warmer than the bedroom by perhaps 4 degrees, because the bedroom wall did not touch the stove. He noticed all of these things in a single half-breath, and noticed also that he had not noticed where his food came from in any meal he had eaten in a year. He ate his bacon. He drank his coffee. He listened to her wash her own mug in the basin. There was no running hot water under power outage. She boiled the kettle for the dishwater. And he thought, very precisely, the following sentence: "I am not going to call anyone today." He had a satchel under the daybed with a phone in it that was going to start screaming as soon as he put it on the porch landline charger. He had a bored chairwoman who was going to assume he had skipped his own oversight call. He had a Quebec utility waiting to meet him at 1 o'clock Monday morning their time to confirm the prototype before signing. He was going to chop kindling. He stood. He took his plate to the basin. She did not look up at him, but her shoulder eased the same 1/4 inch a second time. The morning passed in 2 long, quiet hours. He chopped the kindling. He found that he was bad at it for the first 10 minutes, in the way of a man who had not used a maul since college. And then he was passable. He stacked. He brought the stack in 2 armloads into the wood box by the stove. He found that the cabin was very small, and that he was a tall man in it, and that he had to learn the geometry of where he could stand without taking up the only square of light on the floor. Wren worked at the kitchen table. She had a hand-drawn floor plan of the cabin's east wall and a notebook with measurements in pencil. She was working out where to put a row of low cabinets that would, by the end of mud season, replace the open shelves she had inherited from her grandmother. He watched her measure, then erase, then measure again. He noticed, when she set her pencil down, that she set it parallel to the edge of the notebook every time. He noticed that she had a tin of 7 white sugar cubes on the counter, and that she did not use 1 in her coffee. He did not ask her about the cubes. He did not ask her about anything. He stacked his wood, and he held his peace. A little before noon, the landline rang. Wren went to the porch. The porch was unheated but enclosed, and the phone hung on a hook above a wooden bench, and she lifted the receiver and held it to her ear. Adam stood in the kitchen door and tried to pretend he was not listening. "Mac," she said. Yes, I am fine. There is a man here. He came down on the pond yesterday in a small plane. He is... Yes, he is. Cut above his eye, 3 stitches, no concussion. Yes. Oh, all right. I will. You know what, bring it tomorrow if the road lets you, not today. Today, just go home. The county will run a deputy down the road Sunday morning, I expect. Yes. Tell Marion I said hello to her sister. All right. Goodbye. She hung up. She came back into the kitchen. Old Mac sends his regards, she said. He has been informed of your existence. He is not coming today because his snowmobile belt is acting up, and he is not going to ride 3 miles in this on a bad belt for a man with 3 stitches and a working pulse. He will come by tomorrow morning when the snow eases. He has also informed me, rather strongly, that the deputy will be doing welfare checks down our road by phone Sunday by noon, and he wishes me to tell the deputy you are here when the deputy calls, in those words, so that no one wastes a search and rescue helicopter on a winter Sunday looking for a missing pilot who is sitting in my kitchen eating my bacon. Reasonable, Adam said. He also said... Wren's mouth made a small, dry shape, the closest she had come to a smile since he had walked through the door. He said, "Tell him the pond is yours till spring, but the plane is his till May, you know." Generous, Adam said. Very generous. That is Mac, Wren said. What he said in his own head was, "Big fool plane," but he is too polite to say it twice. Adam laughed. It was a single short laugh, more breath than voice, but it was the first laugh he had laughed without having to plan it in a long time. She let it happen, and she let it pass, and she said, "There is lunch in 20 minutes, soup, from the freezer. I am defrosting it on the back of the stove. It will be fine. Sit." He sat. They were quiet through the soup. The soup was a thick winter potato with white beans and bacon ends, and the steam came up off it in slow curls that smelled of black pepper and bay and the faint smoked salt note of the bacon. The spoons clinked in a rhythm that was not quite the same as a clock. The wood in the stove ticked as it dried. The kerosene lamp made a small, steady hush that he had not noticed in the morning and could not stop noticing now. He could taste the salt on his lower lip after every second spoonful. He felt the warmth of the bowl through the chipped white porcelain into the heel of his palm, and the cold of the kitchen floor through his thick wool socks, where his feet rested on it, and the small, steady warmth coming off the stove against his right shoulder. And between the 3 of them, his body remembered how to be in a room without flinching. Afterward, while she was at the basin again, he said, "May I ask you something?" "Yes." "How much do you want for 2 nights in the cabin?" She set the dish down on the rack so carefully that he heard the porcelain knot click. "For what?" she said. "For the room, and the food, and the bandage, and the stitches, and the lamp oil, and the call to your neighbor." She turned. She did not look angry. She looked tired, in a way that had nothing to do with the morning's work, and he wished immediately that he had taken his question back into his mouth and swallowed it. "This is not a hotel," she said. "I did not mean—" "I know what you did not mean," she said. "I know what you meant. I am going to tell you what the answer is, and you are going to listen to it without saying I am sorry. Because if you say I am sorry, I am going to have to spend the next half hour explaining to you that you do not need to be sorry, and we will lose the half hour." "All right," he said. "The cabin is not for sale. The room is not for rent. The food is what was on the stove. The bandages came out of a box that has been on the cabinet for 12 years. The lamp oil cost me $4 in October, and the call to Mac is on the shared line, which means it cost 0 on my side and 0 on his. The thing you were offering to pay me for did not happen. The thing that happened was a man came down in a snowstorm and a woman opened a door. There is no price on either part of that sentence. If you offer me money for any of it again, I will be insulted, and you will deserve the insult. She paused. And the storm, she said, is not for sale. He held her eye. I understand, he said. I will not offer again. Good. She turned back to the basin. She washed his bowl and her bowl and the saucepan from the soup. He stood and dried, with a thin towel she handed him without comment, and they did the dishes the way two people who do not yet know one another do dishes, with care for the geometry of elbows. When the dishes were done, he said quietly, "Thank you for telling me directly." She looked at him sideways. "That was old Mac you should be thanking," she said. "He once threw a man off this porch for trying to pay him for a tow with $100 bill. I learned from him." "I will thank him tomorrow." "Do," she said, "but not with a bill." The afternoon went past. The snow eased and resumed, and eased and resumed. Adam sat for a while in an armchair by the stove, with a book she had handed him without comment. A hardback edition of a regional Adirondack history from 1948, which he read with the patient attention of a man who had not read a printed book for pleasure in 3 years. And Wren worked on her cabinet drawings, and somewhere along the way she put a cassette into the small battery radio on the windowsill, and a low, warm voice began singing about the Erie Canal. Adam looked up. He had not heard music played that way, on a small speaker, in a small room, with one listener half paying attention, since his grandmother's living room. He read, she sketched. The wind outside continued to do what it had been doing for 28 hours, and the cabin held them. A little after 3, he set the Adirondack book aside and got up to fetch another log for the stove. The log box was nearly empty. He went to the woodshed door, the door behind the kitchen that opened to the lean-to where she kept the split wood, and refilled the box without asking. He brought in 8 pieces. He noticed as he stacked them that she had split the wood herself. The split faces were a little ragged at the corners, in the way an inexperienced maul leaves them, and the lengths were a 1/4 inch off one another. He had done worse. He had also done better, once, on a summer in college, when he had worked a season at a sawmill outside Eugene. He did not say either of these things. He set the wood in the box neatly, with the bark side down. She looked up from her notebook when he was done. "You stack like a man who has stacked before," she said. "One summer, Oregon. I was 19. That is a long way to go for a summer. My father had just been laid off. The mill paid better than anything inside the city. I stayed in the bunkhouse and sent half the check home." She nodded. She did not push the question further. She knew, by listening for 2 days, when to take the half answer he had given and leave the other half on the counter for some other afternoon. "There is a draft on the north window," she said instead. "The lower sash in the corner. I have not had time to weather strip it. There is a roll of foam in the drawer under the basin if you want to do an honest 20 minutes of work. It would warm the room by 2 degrees. He found the foam. He weather-stripped the lower sash. He did the upper sash as well, because he was not going to do half of something that was simple. The room warmed by perhaps 2 degrees, or perhaps it did not. But the wind stopped making the small, high whistle it had been making since lunch, and the kerosene lamp on the table stopped giving the tiny shiver it had been giving in the draft, and the cabin became, by a measure he could not have named, quieter. When he was done, she handed him a glass of water without comment and went back to her drawings. She did not thank him in words. The water was a thanks. He drank it. It was full dark by 4:30. Around 4 o'clock the light shifted. The snow had thinned enough that a real grey-blue twilight began climbing the kitchen window. Wren set down her pencil and crossed to the window over the sink and stood for a long minute looking out at the pond, which was no longer visible. The pond was a 1/4 mile away through trees that had been weighted down to half their height, and the only sign of the pond from the kitchen window was a particular silence in the direction the wind had been coming from. "What were you?" she said. Adam looked up from his book. "What were you?" she said again, without turning. "Going to do in Montreal on Monday?" He thought about it. He did not think very long. "Sign a deal," he said. "For what?" "A test facility for a battery technology my company makes. The utility wants to confirm the prototype works at scale. If it does, we anchor a 5-year contract, Monday." "Are you the company?" she said. He had not been asked the question in that form before. He thought about it. "I founded it," he said. "I run it. I am not the company. The company is the team." "How many people?" she said. "On payroll, 310. Counting subcontractors on the test floor, closer to 450. She nodded. She still did not turn. "And you flew yourself?" she said. "I prefer to." "Why?" He thought about that one for longer. "Because the corporate plane belongs to the company," he said, "and the company belongs to its shareholders. And when I sit in the front left seat of my own little plane, no shareholder gets to ask me where I am going." The pencil on the kitchen table was still parallel to the notebook. Wren turned, finally, and looked at him across the room. The kerosene lamp was lit on the table, because the afternoon light had gone, and her face was lit from below. "That is the first thing you have said to me," she said, "that I think is the truth." He held her eyes. He did not look away. "All of it has been the truth," he said. "That was the first that was about me." She nodded. She did not smile. She picked up her pencil. "What is for supper?" he said, because the silence had become something he did not yet know how to be in. "You are chopping carrots," she said. He chopped carrots. The afternoon went into evening. The supper was a chicken stew she had taken out of the freezer at lunch and warmed on the wood stove. There was a wedge of cornbread she made from a quart jar mix she kept on the shelf. There were 2 oranges from a paper sack on the porch. There was a bowl of canned pears with cinnamon. He ate. She ate. He cleared. She washed. He dried. The candles came out after supper. She had electric lamps in the cabin, but with the power down, they were ornaments. She used a hurricane lantern and 3 stubs on a tin plate, and the kitchen took on a quality of light that he had not seen since a particular Christmas Eve when he had been 11. The candles smelled of bayberry and a little of tallow, and the wicks gave a soft, round flutter that made the shadows on the pine walls slide an inch one way and an inch back. The room was quieter at low light than it had been at high light. He could hear the slow tick of the clock in the wall behind him, the small, dry sound of a page being turned in the magazine she was reading, the settle of a log in the stove. He could smell the cooled chicken stew on the back burner, and the warm wax of the candles, and the faint cedar of the chair under him. They sat by the stove. She read a magazine she had on the bench, an old back issue of a woodworking quarterly. He read more of his Adirondack history. The clock his grandfather had made out of birch and a marine chronometer ticked. A little before 9, the storm rose again. Not as hard as the first night, but hard. The cabin creaked the way a wooden boat creaks. She set her magazine down. "You should turn in," she said. "Bed is yours. Daybed is yours. The loft is mine. The bed has the better mattress. Take it. You came down hard yesterday. If your head hurts in the night, knock once on the loft ladder and I will come down. The daybed is fine. Take the bed. I am not making the offer twice." "All right," he said. "Thank you." "There is water on the nightstand. There is a wool blanket folded on the chair. The room is warmer than the kitchen because of the wall against the stove. Sleep." He stood. He went, after a moment, into the small bedroom. The bed was made up with a single dark green wool blanket and a quilt that had been pieced from old work shirts in the 1950s. He looked at it. He sat on the edge of it and unlaced his boots. He thought, again, the thought he had thought the night before. Nobody knows I am here. He thought a second thing, this one new. He thought, I do not want anyone to know. He lay down. He slept. He did not dream. In the kitchen, Wren sat for a long time at the table, with the lamp turned low, and a cup of unsweetened tea between her hands. She thought about the way the corner of his mouth had moved, when he had said about the plane that no shareholder gets to ask me where I am going. She thought about the way she had heard her own father once say, looking at his own workshop, that the best part of the day was the half hour before the radio came on. She did not allow herself to think about that for very long. She washed the cup. She climbed the ladder to the loft. She slept under 3 quilts because the wind had teeth. In the morning, the storm had begun to give up. Sunday came in soft. The wind had dropped to a steady push. The snow had thinned to a slow drift, and there was, for the first time in 2 days, a thinning of light in the east that suggested the sun was somewhere behind it. Wren built the wood stove. She put coffee on. She came down the ladder. Adam was already up. He had banked the fire and brought in an armload of kindling from the porch and put it in the woodbox. You did not have to, she said. I did not have to last time either, he said, and you fed me anyway. She gave him the small, dry shape of a smile. She poured 2 coffees. They drank them at the table without speaking, because Sunday morning silence was its own conversation when 2 people had earned it together by Saturday afternoon. A little after 8, old Mac came up the drive on his snowmobile. Wren heard him from the porch a quarter-mile out. She put down her mug. That is Mac, she said. He will come in. He will look at you. He will look at me. He will say one thing more than he needs to, because that is how he is. Be patient with him. He is the closest thing I have to a relative within 50 miles. Understood. Old Mac came up the porch steps and stamped his boots and pushed open the door without knocking, because that was how Mac came into Wren's house. He was a slight man, white-haired under a wool watch cap, with a face that had been at altitude long enough to remember every day of it. He looked at Adam. Adam stood up. Mac looked at Adam a beat longer than necessary. Mac, Wren said. Adam Cade. Adam? Mac McRae. Coffee? Coffee, Mac said, and sat at the table. He took the mug she handed him in both hands and warmed his palms on it for a minute before he drank. That a 180 on the pond, he said. Yes, Adam said. On skis. On skis. Engine quit on you. Carburetor iced. I should have caught it sooner. Or 2, Mac said. You know. Yes. Mac drank his coffee. He did not look at Adam for the time it took him to drink it. He looked at Wren's pencil and the parallel notebook. He looked at the stove. He looked at the patched square of plaster above the bedroom door that Wren had finished in October. He looked back at Adam. You laid her down clean, he said. Got her up in the drift on the north side. Wingtip is in the snow, but the strut is fine. Spring comes, the ice gives way under her wheels first if you do nothing. Move her tomorrow if the weather holds. Be a bear to move her by yourself. I will give you a hand on the snowmobile. That would be, you can do me a favor back later in the year, you know, Mac said. Wren tells me you're in some line of work. Whatever it is, I do not need it. But maybe someday I need somebody to pick up a hardware order in Glens Falls. Maybe you can do that for me, if you happen to be passing through Glens Falls. I will be passing through Glens Falls, Adam said, however many times you need. Mac nodded. He drank the rest of his coffee in a single long pull. He set the mug down. Brought you Friday's mail, he said to Wren, and put a small bundle on the counter. Reader's Digest, 2 seed catalogues, bill from the propane outfit. Wall Street Journal. Marion thought you might like to see something in the business section. No idea what. She is always thinking about you. I have not looked. Wren looked at the bundle. She did not look at the journal. Thank her for me, she said. I will, Mac said. He stood. Deputy is going to call you around 10 or 11, depending. He will ask if you are alone. You tell him about Mr. Cade here, so they do not lose a helicopter. I will. Mr. Cade. Mac put his hand out briefly and shook Adam's hand once. Welcome to the pond, you know. He went. The snowmobile started. The snowmobile receded. Wren picked up the Wall Street Journal. She did not unfold it. She set it on the porch table, on top of the seed catalogues, face down. She came back into the kitchen. Eat your toast, she said. He ate his toast. The toast was a wheat farm loaf she had cut thick and put on the cast iron until the surface was a deep brown that smelled of warm grain and butter and the faint nuttiness of a crust gone a half shade past perfect. He felt the grit of the rough flour against the roof of his mouth and the slick of cold butter melting where the heat of the bread had not quite reached. He could hear Wren at the basin, the small, clean rasp of a brass scrubber against an iron pan, the slow drip of the tap that had a washer she had been meaning to replace, the long settle of a log in the stove. The morning light through the kitchen window had warmed a half shade since Mac had left, and the patch it made on the pine floor had moved 2 inches east. The deputy called at 10:14. Wren took the call in the kitchen with the cord stretched through the porch door. The conversation lasted 90 seconds. She came back in. He is satisfied, she said. He says good morning. Good. He also asked twice if I was all right. What did you tell him? I told him I was all right, she said, which I am. Good. She crossed to the stove and added a log. She added 1 log. Mid-morning, she said, I'm going to walk down to the pond. I want to see your plane on my pond. You can come with me if your head is up to it, or stay here by the stove. I would like to come. Coat by the door, gloves on the bench. Your boots are dry now. 5 minutes. They walked. The drive went down through the pines to the pond, and the snow was 20 inches deep on the road and waist deep in places off the road. She broke trail. He walked behind her. He did not offer to break trail because she had not asked him to, and because her step was even and his head still felt like a stitched cut. The pines smelled the way pines smell after a snow, which is the smell of clean glass. Halfway down she stopped and turned a quarter to him without quite looking back, and pointed, with a mittened hand, at a particular trunk that was scarred at hip height with a long, pale chalk line. My grandfather notched that tree the winter I was 4, she said. He marked the place where the snow came up to my waist. He said if I made it to that tree on snowshoes by myself, I could have a maple sugar cookie. I made it. Did he watch? He pretended to be reading. He had a window seat. The window seat is gone now. The notch is not. She walked on. He watched the notch as he passed it and thought, without yet knowing what to do with the thought, that this drive had been walked by people who loved her, in winter, when she had been a small person in a borrowed coat, and that the only reason he was being walked down it now was that she had decided he could be. The pond opened in front of them like a white plate. The light off the snow was the cold, blue-white of an overexposed photograph, and the air at the shoreline smelled of pond ice and cold cedar, and the faint mineral edge of open water somewhere out past the center, where the wind had scoured the snow clean. His plane sat near the north shore, a small, dark blue shape against the white, the wingtip just into the drift, the way Mac had said. 2 crows were sitting on the cow. They both looked up as Wren and Adam came out of the trees, and then they decided the threat was acceptable and went back to looking at the snow. Wren could hear the slow creak of the ice somewhere under their feet. Not a worrying sound, the working sound of a frozen lake breathing on a warming morning, and the soft hush of snow sliding off a bowed branch behind them, and her own pulse in the cold tips of her ears. Adam stood for a minute and looked at his plane. The plane looked smaller than he remembered. The pond looked larger.
"That is your plane," Wren said.
"That is my plane. It is a good plane. It is. It will go up again. It will." She turned a quarter turn and looked at him in the white light. "You watched me draw cabinets yesterday," she said, "and you did not ask me a single question about them." "I did not." "You did not ask me what was going on the east wall, or when I was going to build them, or what came after the cabin was finished. I noticed that. Most people ask. I said nothing about it at the time because the not asking was a kindness. I am saying something about it now because the not asking was also a question I owed myself an answer to. I do not think about after. I have not in 6 weeks." He held her eyes. "I am asking you now," he said. "What about after this storm?" She did not look away. She did not answer in words. She lifted her ungloved hand and laid it for 2 seconds in his. The 2 seconds were neither long nor short. The crows did not move. The wind held its breath. Then she took her hand back and put it in her coat pocket and turned and started back up the drive. He stood for one more moment looking at the plane. He thought, "I will tell her at lunch." He started up the drive after her. He did not tell her at lunch. He did not tell her at lunch because the power came back on at 12:18, and the answering machine on the porch coughed twice and played 20 seconds of a dial tone, and then began playing the messages it had stored through 40 hours of silence. And the third message was a voice he knew very well. He did not know the answering machine was on the porch until it spoke. He had been inside the kitchen, pouring a fresh pot of water onto the back of the stove, because there had been no hot water for 2 days, and Wren had said she was going to wash her hair after lunch if the power did not come back. And the power had come back, and the machine spoke through the porch door. "Adam." It was a long pause. "If you'd allow me a kindness." "It is, Margot." The Pearson call moved to Sunday afternoon. Your time, my time, somebody's time, I do not care which time. And you are not answering anything. Frankly, the board has noticed. You have until Monday morning Eastern to either be in this conference room or to give me your founder shares proxy. Sign by Monday, or do not bother coming back to the building. I keep my father's pen in my pocket on board days. I have it now. I would prefer to set it down. Please, call me." The line clicked. The line then clicked again, because the machine moved to the next message, which was from a propane company asking for an oil tank reading. Wren turned from the stove and looked at the porch door and then at Adam. Adam looked back at her with a face that, if she had not been looking at it carefully for 2 days, she might have read as calm. "Who," she said, "is Margot?" He did not lie. "The chair of my board," he said.
"The board of what?"
"The company I founded." "The company?" "Yes. The company you came down on my pond to avoid signing a deal for on Monday." "To sign a deal for on Monday," he said, "not to avoid." "Adam." "I came down because the carburetor iced, Wren. I did not plan to come down." "I am asking you," she said carefully, "if you came down on my pond on purpose." "No." "All right." She did not move from the stove. She set the kettle down. She walked very calmly to the porch. She did not open the porch door. She came back into the kitchen and she said, "There was a Wall Street Journal in the mail." "I saw it." "You knew before you saw it." "Yes." "You knew Friday night." "Yes." "You knew on Saturday morning when I told you the cabin was not for sale and you offered me money." "I knew on Saturday morning," he said. "Yes." "You knew this morning when I walked you down to your plane." "Yes." "You knew at the pond when I—"
She stopped.
She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. She lifted 2 fingers and pressed them against the underside of her left wrist. She held them there a long time. Adam watched her count, although he did not yet understand that what she was doing was counting. "What is your last name?" she said. It was a statement, not a question. "Cade," he said. "It has always been Cade." Cade. Cade Thermal Industries. The IPO last week. Yes. $2.3 billion at the bell. 2.1 this morning, he said. The market opens tomorrow, and we will see. Stop, she said, very softly. All right. I do not want a stock quote. I will not give one. She looked at the kettle. She looked at the porch door. She looked, for one moment, at the patched square of plaster above the bedroom door that she had finished in October with her own hands. Her own hands had finished it. When were you going to tell me? She said. At lunch. You were going to tell me at lunch. I made the decision an hour ago at the pond. I was going to tell you at lunch. After I walked you down to your plane? Yes. After last night? Last night I had not made the decision yet. Adam. I know. Adam, I gave you my grandmother's bed. I know. I cleaned a cut on your face. I know. I made you bacon. I know. I gave you the last strip of bacon in the icebox. I know, I know. She turned away from the stove. She walked to the porch door and stood with her hand on the frame, and she did not open the door. She did not raise her voice. She did not raise her voice, because if she raised her voice now, she would not stop raising it for an hour, and she did not have an hour in her to give. She had 30 seconds. I want, she said, for you to take the bedroom. Wren, I want you to take the bedroom and shut the door behind you and stay there until I tell you to come out. I will sleep on the daybed. I will not be cooking dinner. There is bread on the counter, and there is peanut butter in the cabinet by the sink. There is water in the kettle. You will not need me for anything else tonight. Wren. You will say my name once more, and then you will go into the bedroom. He waited. He said, Wren. He went into the bedroom. He shut the door behind him. He sat on the edge of the bed. In the kitchen, Wren stood with her hand on the porch door frame, and she did not cry. She did not cry because crying was a luxury, and she did not allow herself luxuries. She lifted her 2 fingers off her wrist. She walked to the stove. She turned the burner off under the kettle. She walked to the counter. She picked up the small tin in which she kept her matches, and she counted them. There were 9. She had used 2 since the man had come to her door. She thought, very clearly, maybe he came down on my pond because the carburetor iced. And maybe he stayed because the carburetor iced. And maybe everything he has said is true. And maybe he chose, in 3 minutes Friday afternoon, between the company that wants him out and the company of a woman in a cabin who would never ask him for the company. And maybe what I was, in this kitchen, was a soft place to stand for 40 hours. And the soft place is paid for now. And the soft place will be remembered in 3 weeks as a story he tells at a dinner. Maybe Adam Cade really only sees in me what is useful to him for 40 hours. Maybe Adam Cade really did not come down for himself. He came down for the story of the man who came down. Maybe I let myself want a person, and I am about to pay for it the way I pay for everything I want. She stood at the counter with the tin in her hand, and let those sentences arrive and pass through her one at a time. She did not believe all of them. She did not have to believe all of them to know that the bottom of the well she was standing in was lower than she had thought. She set the tin down. She set it parallel to the edge of the counter. She walked, very quietly, to the daybed near the stove, and lay down on it. And she did not sleep, and she did not get up to make supper. and the cabin around her made the small, honest sounds of a cabin in late afternoon. And the man in her bedroom did not come out, and she did not call him. And the snow outside began, lightly, to fall again. In the bedroom, Adam sat on the edge of the bed with his elbows on his knees, and his hands hung between them, and his head down. He did not feel sorry for himself. He had not earned the right to feel sorry for himself. He felt something else, which was that he had spent 8 days being a famous founder, and 40 hours being a stranger in a kitchen. And the second man was a better man than the first, and he had been about to lose the second man to the calendar, and instead, he had lost something else, which was the trust of the only person who had seen the second man at all. He looked, for a long minute, at the small dark green wool blanket folded on the chair by the bed. Then he stood. He went, in his socks, to his satchel on the floor by the window, and he opened it, and he took out, in order, his phone, off, drained for 2 days, useless, his passport, an unsigned trust instrument his lawyer had drafted and dated Thursday as a contingency Adam had refused all week to commit to, 3 black pens, the keys to his apartment in Hudson, and a folded paper bag he had grabbed from the hanger Friday morning to wrap his lunch in and had not used. He took the paper bag and the carpenter's pencil he had bought at the hanger shop, and he sat down at the small desk in the bedroom. Wren's grandfather had built it of birch, against the inside wall, and he began, in steady block letters, to write. He wrote for 2 hours. In the kitchen, Wren listened, after a while, to the sound of a pencil on paper coming from behind the bedroom door, and she did not get up to ask what he was writing. She was sleeping by then. Not deeply. It was a Sunday night, and the storm finished itself off after midnight, and the wind blew through and went somewhere else, and the cabin held its peace. When she woke up, it was Monday before dawn. The pencil sound had stopped. She got up. She put her boots on and her wool shirt and her coat. She lit the kerosene lamp out of habit, even though the power was on. She made coffee in the camp percolator on top of the stove, even though the electric coffee maker would have done it faster. She poured a single cup. She walked to the kitchen table. There was a sheet of folded paper bag on the kitchen table. There was a phone next to it. There was a single brass key on a leather fob. There was a separate legal letter under all of these, the kind of letter typed on heavy cream paper, drafted by a New York firm, and dated the previous Thursday, with Adam's signature added in fresh, dark ink on the bottom of every page, and a small penciled note in the margin of the last page that said, "Will notarize at Long Lake on arrival, A.K." She looked at the bedroom door. The door was open. The bedroom was empty. The dark green wool blanket was folded on the chair where she had left it Saturday night. She read the paper bag first. The handwriting was steady, and the letters were tall and narrow, and it said, "Wren, you told me on Saturday that the storm was not for sale. I have been thinking about that since the answering machine spoke yesterday afternoon. You were right. The cabin was not for sale, and the storm was not for sale, and the kindness was not for sale, and the strip of bacon on my plate was not for sale. None of it was for sale. I should have told you Friday night. I told myself I would tell you Saturday. I told myself I would tell you at the pond yesterday. I let you make me bacon while I knew, and I let you give me your grandmother's bed while I knew, and I let you walk me down to my own plane while I knew. And the longer I let it go, the more it became the kind of lie that wears the clothes of a kindness. That is the worst kind of lie a person can tell another person, because the lie eats the kindness from inside. I am sorry. I will be sorry about the specific thing I did, and the specific hour I did it, not about the general shape of being sorry, because the general shape is no good to you. You asked me at the pond yesterday, what about after this storm? I am answering that question. Beside this letter, you will find Item 1. My phone. The numbers in it that matter to me right now are the number of the chair of my board and the number of the utility I was meant to be signing a contract with in Montreal this morning. You may give either number to a deputy, or to a reporter, or to nobody. The phone is no longer mine. I am leaving it with you because while it is in this kitchen, I am not afraid of it. Item 2. The keys to my apartment in Hudson. Apartment 4C, 22 Allen Street. There is a clean change of clothes and a pot of money in the cookie tin on the counter for emergencies that you can use for any reason you want at any time. The lease is paid through October. If you ever need a night in town for anything, a dentist, a bank, a quiet day, the apartment is yours for as long as I have it. Item 3. The trust letter underneath this one. My lawyer drafted it Thursday as a contingency I told him I was unlikely to use. I signed it last night at your kitchen desk.
I will have it notarized at Long Lake before the market opens. Read it now if you want. I will summarize it here, because I would not blame you for not wanting to read 3 pages of trust language at 5 in the morning. The letter transfers my founder-class voting shares of Cade Thermal Industries, the shares that, together, give me board control on Monday morning, into a blind trust for 18 months. The trust votes per the chair of the board. The chair of the board is the woman whose voice you heard on my answering machine yesterday. She has been trying since the S1 filing to take this exact decision from me. I am giving it to her this morning before the market opens. I am doing this because, after the answering machine yesterday, you needed to know whether I was using your cabin as a tactical shelter from my own board. I was not. I'm going to prove it the only way I can prove a thing of that shape, which is to give up the thing I would have been protecting by staying here. I do not get to keep both the cabin weekend and the board control. I am keeping the cabin weekend. You should know, because I want you to know everything, that this also means the Quebec contract may not get signed today. The chair will vote my shares according to her own judgment. She may sign the contract, or she may not. If she does not, my company will be worth roughly 40% less by the end of this week. I have made my peace with that. I have not made anyone else's peace with that. The team will be all right. They were always going to be all right. I am going down to the pond with my satchel. Old Mac said yesterday he would help me move the plane. If he is not awake when I get there, I will sit and wait. I will fly out to the strip at Long Lake, and from there I will get to a phone, and from there I will deal with what I have to deal with. If you do not want me to come back, write nothing. If you want me to come back, write 1 sentence on this page and put it under the cookie tin in the apartment, and I will know. I am not asking you to forgive me by next Friday. I am asking you only, and this is the only thing I am asking you in this letter, whether on next Friday I may come up the drive in a borrowed truck with a sack of groceries and sit at your table for an hour. If the answer is no, I will not come up the drive on next Friday or any Friday. If the answer is yes, I will be there at noon. I should have told you Saturday morning. I knew on Saturday morning. I let you make me breakfast on Sunday. A. She set the paper bag down. She read the trust letter. It was 3 pages. It said what he had said it said. The drafting date was the previous Thursday, 3 days before he had taken off, and his lawyer's draft signature block was already typed under it. Adam's own signature, on every page, was in different ink from the typing, fresh and dark, and put there at her kitchen desk in the night. That was the part that landed. He had been carrying the option in his satchel the whole weekend. Drafted as a contingency, he had told his lawyer he would not use. And he had made it real, in pen, on her grandfather's birch desk, between the porch door closing on him on Sunday afternoon and dawn on Monday. She set the letter down beside the paper bag. She picked up the phone. She turned it on. It came up. There were 173 missed calls and 461 unread messages. She held the phone for 1 minute, looking at the lock screen, which was a black background with a white outline of a small plane. And then she put it back on the table next to the brass key, which she did not touch. She put on her coat. She put on her boots. She put on her gloves.
She went outside. The pre-dawn sky was clearing in patches. The pines were heavy. The drive had been broken by a single set of boot prints heading down to the pond, and a single set of snowmobile tracks coming up. Old Mac had been by then, on his way somewhere, or somebody had been by. She followed the boot prints. She came out of the trees at the pond a little after 6. The light was just barely enough to see by. The plane was no longer in the drift on the north side. The plane was on the ice in the center of the pond, the way Mac had said could be done if there were 2 of them and a snowmobile. And the propeller was already turning slowly in a warm-up pattern, and the cabin door of the plane was open. Adam was on the ice. He saw her come out of the trees. He did not move toward her. She did not move toward him. They stood that way for half a minute. Then she walked across the ice to him. She stopped at 4 feet. She lifted her 2 fingers and pressed them against the underside of her left wrist, briefly, and then she let her hand fall back to her side. She looked up at him. "You wrote me a long letter," she said.
I did.
"For a man who claims to live by short sentences." It was an exception. "You signed away your company." "I signed away my control of my company. There is a difference. The team is the company. The board chair has been trying to take it from you for 6 months. And you handed it to her. For 18 months. Blind trust. Reversible by mutual agreement at month 9 if she and I both ask." "That is not why you did it." "No." "Why did you do it?" "Because I needed to give you a thing that cost me what I owed you," he said. "Money would have insulted you. Time was already yours. The deal would have insulted you twice. The thing I had left to give that was actually a cost to me was the seat. So I gave it." "You did not have to." "I had to." "Adam." "Yes." "I am not going to give you an answer this morning." "I did not ask for one this morning." "I am going to think about it for the week." "I would expect you to." She looked at him for a long moment in the bluing light. "I read your letter twice," she said. "I read the notarized paper once. I'm not going to put a sentence under your cookie tin. I am going to give you the sentence here." He waited. "Come up the drive on Friday," she said. "Not in a borrowed truck. Coming your own way. There will be soup on the stove. There will be coffee. There will be a chair for you at the table." He held very still. "All right," he said. "And Adam." "Yes?" "If you ever do not tell me a thing you have decided to tell me, you do not get the second chance to do it later. You tell me at the door." "Understood." She did not put out her hands to him. She did not need to. She stepped back 2 paces on the ice. "Fly safely," she said. "The wind aloft will be from the northwest at 20 until 10 o'clock, and then it will lay down. The strip at Long Lake is clear. Mac called the manager last night. He told the manager you were Mac's nephew because he did not want to use your name on a telephone." That was generous of him. That was Mac. I owe him a hardware run to Glens Falls. He has not forgotten. She turned. She walked back across the ice toward the shore. She did not look back. She did not look back because looking back was a luxury, and she did not allow herself luxuries today. She heard the engine start behind her, in the careful way a small engine starts in cold air, with the throttle nursed up. She heard the run-up. She heard him taxi out to the center of the pond and turn into the wind. She heard the throttle go to full power. She heard the skis hiss on the snowpack and lift, and the small engine sound lift with them. And she heard the plane climb out of the pond, bowl over the trees. And she heard it bank once to the south. And she heard it become first faint, and then distant, and then gone. She kept walking up the drive. She let herself, when she reached her kitchen door, finally turn and look at the white country behind her. She thought, I am not counting matches today. She thought, I'm going to put 2 sugar cubes in my coffee. She went inside. She put 2 sugar cubes in her coffee. They did not change the coffee very much. They changed her hand. The cabin held its second silence of the morning. She did not cry into it. She walked into the kitchen and stood at the counter and let her breathing find its own rhythm again. The kettle was still hot. She poured another cup. She did not put a sugar cube in it yet. She was not yet ready for the second cube. Out on the porch, in the cold morning, the phone he had left on the table did not ring, because she had not turned the ringer back on after the storm. It would not ring all day. It would not ring all week. She would leave it on the table where he had left it. On a Sunday in late March, she would, finally, plug it into the wall behind the porch bench to charge, and she would open it, and she would look at the photograph he had set as his lock screen, the small white outline of a small plane. And she would lock it again, and she would set it back on the table, and she would say to the empty porch, "All right." That was a thing she would do on a Sunday. It was 3 weeks away yet. For now, on this Monday morning, with the man's letter and the man's notarized paper and the man's brass key on her grandmother's pine table, she did the small things her hands had been doing for 6 weeks. She put the dishes from the night before into the basin. She wiped the counter. She fed the stove a single log because one log was right for the temperature in the room. She made her bed in the loft. She came down, and she sat at the table again, and she looked, for a long minute, at the row of low cabinets she had not yet built on the east wall, and she thought about the wood she would need, and the brass cup pulls she had bought in October, and the way the morning light would land on the varnish in May. The weeks did what the weeks do. On Monday morning at 9, the market opened. The corner office on the 38th floor smelled of fresh coffee, and the warm paper dust of the fax tray, and the cold green smell of cut tulips standing in a glass on her desk. By 9:15, Margot Veen was on a conference line with 3 lawyers and an outside director, and a single, brief, written instruction from the founder, faxed from a small airstrip office at Long Lake, that contained the words, "blind trust," and 18 months, and assignment, as previously discussed. The fax page was still warm under her left hand. She could feel the slight curl at its edge and hear the soft mechanical click of the line every time one of the lawyers in Chicago breathed in. By 10, she had voted his shares. By 11, she had also done something that surprised the lawyers, which was that she had voted his shares to sign the Quebec contract. She had been holding the silver pen between her thumb and forefinger as she did it. The metal was cool against the pad of her thumb. The cap tasted faintly of brass when she pressed it briefly to her lower lip, and the tip made a small, dry scratch on the signature line that she heard more clearly than the voices in her ear. She did not know why she had done what she had done. Later, on a long drive home, she would tell her late father out loud that she had done it because, between the founder who skipped his own oversight call and the founder who handed her the keys with both hands, there was a man worth keeping in a chair. She would also tell him she had not done it for him. That last part was almost true. In the cabin on the pond, Wren restored the cabinets on the east wall. She built a row of low cabinets out of 2x8s and old door panels and varnished them on a Thursday afternoon. She finished them on the Friday Adam was due to come up the drive. She finished them at 11:47 and washed her hands and put a kettle on and sat at the table to wait, and at 12:04, she heard a truck come up the drive. It was not a borrowed truck. It was a 1996 Ford F-150 with snow chains in the bed, and Adam Cade was driving it, and he had a sack of groceries on the passenger seat, and a small paper-wrapped object she could not see from the kitchen window. He parked. He came up the steps. He stamped his boots. She opened the door before he knocked. "Right," she said. "In, before the door freezes." The door did not need to freeze. The cabin was warm. The joke was that the joke had become the joke between them. He laughed. He came in. He came up the drive on alternate Fridays for the rest of the spring. The board did not oust him. The blind trust, having moved both Adam's shares and Margot's spine in unexpected directions, made it harder for the board to oust the founder than it had been before, because the founder had publicly given up the power to oust them. The Quebec contract held. The stock recovered. By April, it was past where it had been at the IPO bell. Adam did not look at the stock. He looked at the cabinets on the east wall. Old Mac, in March, took receipt of a hardware order from Glens Falls that Adam picked up in person on a Thursday afternoon at the lumberyard counter and drove out personally. The hardware order included 3 replacement belts for a snowmobile, 4 cans of 2-cycle oil, a box of stove gaskets, a length of copper pipe, and 1 small bottle of single malt scotch that Mac had not ordered. Mac drank the scotch on his porch in April and did not call to thank Adam, because Mac did not call. Hazel Calloway, Wren's younger sister, came up to the cabin in early May for a weekend. She met Adam at the kitchen table over coffee. She made it through 20 minutes of polite small talk, and then she said to Wren, in a separate room with the door closed, "Okay, so he is the nicest man I have ever met, and I'm going to fight you if you hurt him." Wren had laughed for the first time since February. Hazel had spent the rest of the afternoon out on the dock, helping Adam retar a section of seam, and had spent the evening asking him very direct questions about engines, because Hazel had grown up the kind of girl who took small motors apart on the kitchen floor. Adam had answered every question she had asked him, with the same care he had answered Wren's about the company. When Hazel had finally said, "Okay, so why a 180 specifically, not a 185? Adam had explained for 10 minutes, with both hands moving, and Hazel had nodded the whole way through. Wren had stood at the kitchen window, doing dishes, and listening to the two of them on the dock, and had felt, for the first time in a long time, the quiet of a house that contained people she did not need to manage. In late March, on a Wednesday afternoon, Old Mac had come into the bakery in Hudson on his way back from Glens Falls. He had sat at the corner table for 40 minutes with a black coffee and a single cardamom bun, had not said more than 9 words the whole visit, had paid with a $5 bill and refused the change, and had stopped on his way out to tell Wren, in the lowest voice she had ever heard him use. He came up the drive every Friday since, you know. Then he had gone. He had not come into the bakery a second time. He did not need to. In early April, Margot Veen had, against her own advice, met Adam at a coffee shop in Midtown. She had brought the silver pen. She had set it on the table between them without saying anything about it. She had taken her hand off it and let him pick it up. He had looked at it for a long time and had set it back down without taking it. They'd not signed anything that afternoon, but the 18 months of the blind trust had quietly become 12 at month 9, which was something a board chair and a founder could do with a single co-signed letter. And the letter sat on her desk in a closed manila folder for a week before she walked it down the hall to legal. She had asked Adam, before he had stood up to leave the coffee shop, what had changed his mind in the cabin. He had thought about it for a long time, and then he had said, it was not in the cabin. It was the morning after, on the ice. She had not asked what that meant. She had let the sentence be the answer. In May, the cabin came off the restoration list. Wren did not sell it. She did not, in fact, do anything she had told herself at Christmas she was going to do. She drove home to Hudson, and she opened her bakery door on a Tuesday morning, and she taped a small, handwritten sign in the window that said, "Home," and turned on the ovens. There was a single anonymous personal loan in her business account that had arrived in March from the law firm of a man named A. Cade, with an interest rate, a 5-year payment schedule, and a signed agreement that she would pay it off out of the till at $400 a month, and would owe nothing further. She paid off the first payment in March. She paid the second in April. The bakery began to run. On a rainy May Thursday, she was in the bakery alone in the late afternoon. The rain had cleared the foot traffic, and she was rotating a tray of cardamom buns out of the case to glaze them for the next morning. She heard the bell on the door. She did not look up immediately. She finished the glaze. She set the brush down. She turned. There was a tall man standing inside the door, with a small leather satchel held flat against his ribs. He had rain on his shoulder. His hair was wet at the temples. He was looking at her the way he had looked at her, once, by lamplight, after she had finished closing a cut over his eye. She lifted 2 fingers and pressed them, briefly, against the underside of her left wrist. Then she let her hand fall back to her side, because she was not counting anymore. She smiled at him. "Right," she said. "In, before the door freezes." The bell over the door rang as it shut behind him. The cardamom buns smelled of cardamom and butter and sugar, and the small, clean note of orange zest she had grated into the glaze. The rain hit the front window in a long, even rhythm that smelled, where the door opened, of warm, wet pavement and lilac from the bushes outside the bookshop next door. The radio on the back counter was playing a low, warm voice singing about the Erie Canal. The 2 sugar cubes she had put in her own coffee that morning were dissolved by now, and they had not changed the coffee very much. But they had changed her hand. She could feel the warm tile under the canvas of her shoes, and the warm steam of the oven on the back of her wrist, and the cool damp of the air from the open door on the inside of her left elbow, where her sleeve was rolled. She came out from behind the counter. He set the satchel down on the nearest table. He said, "Wren." She said, "Adam."